Hello and welcome to part 3 of the ultimate needle felted mouse tutorial. I want you to get your brush mats at the ready today because we are going to be making the bulk for your mouse to make him super cute and super squidgy and chubby. So I hope you enjoyed this part of the tutorial. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, The Dopamine Artist, and I will see you tomorrow with part 4. Take care. Now, the next section of creating our mouse is to create the bulk that we're going to add to his belly and his head. And this is going to enable us to shape him into more of a mousy shape as we progress through the tutorial. And the wool I'm using is the white Shetland core wool again. And the reason I'm using this is because it's a nice bright white, so it will blend in nicely when I'm using the white Gotland on the top later. And it's got a lovely loftiness to it as well, which felts down very easily. So it helps us to create our 3D mouse shape with a lot more ease than some other wools. So just make sure that you've got all your fibres going in the same direction. And I'm just going to measure this piece, which is 9 inches by 2 inches in width, 9 inches in length. And what we're going to do is we're going to pull this piece in half and we're going to use the other half in a moment. So I'm just going to give this a pull. So from the furthest ends, just pull it lightly and it should come apart very easily. And then I'm going to pull the piece again. And then from the furthest end, it might be a bit trickier this time because it's shorter, but pull it again. And then lay that on top of the wool again. So you've got a wool sandwich. And then what we're going to do is we're going to felt this into a rectangle shape, and that's going to form the first layer of our mouse belly. So I'm going to take my 7 needle multi-tool, and in there I have 7 fine, so 40 gauge triangular needles. And I'm just stabbing directly downwards onto the brush mat with that 7 needle multi-tool. And the reason I like using the fine needles is because it doesn't leave too much of an indentation when the mouse is finished. So that's measuring 2 inches at the moment. That's going to be the width. And then I'm just going to take those fluffier sides and I'm going to fold them over, just hold them briefly with my hand whilst I just stab it once in place to anchor it. And then what I'm doing there, it's difficult to see, but I'm just using very lightly the ends of the needles to just pull over any stray pieces of wool. And then I'm going to do the same on this side. I'm just going to pull that over and then I'm going to anchor it and then move my hand away. You don't want to stab yourself with one of these because wow, you know it when you do it. So I'm just taking the ends up now and I'm stabbing those down. And it doesn't have to be overly neat, this piece, because ultimately it's going to be inside your sculpture. But it's nice to get a sort of like the shape, the rough shape of the rectangle for it. So that piece is 2 inches by 2.5 inches in size. And that is your piece number 1. And it's probably worth trying to keep them so that you know which piece is which number when we come to add them to our mouse later in the tutorial. So I'm just taking that second piece of half that we pulled off a moment ago, and I've just pulled it twice into a wool sandwich. I'm just taking a bit extra because this piece wants to be a little bit larger than the piece we made a moment ago. So making another wool sandwich, and then again we are going to felt that down into a rectangular shape. So what I'm going to do, so that's about 4.5 inches by about 3 inches in width. So what I'm going to do is just hold that down with my index finger and my forefinger splayed so it doesn't go anywhere because it wants to move. And I'm just going to do a couple of stabs in between my fingers to anchor it down, and then move your hand out the way and then start to stab as we did before with the other piece. So always be very cautious and when your hands are in a position where they're a bit vulnerable, always do things very slowly and cautiously. So that's measuring 3 inches by 2 inches in width. So it's slightly longer, this piece, but it's the same width as the previous piece. And then as before, we're going to fold the edges over. So I'm going to take this first edge and felt that down. And then we're going to go through this process again, using the needles to just bring over any fluff. And then at the bottom and the top. And it just kind of helps when you're folding the wool as well. It also helps to give the piece a bit more bulk to it. So you're adding that additional bulk to the mouse tummy and his chest as well. So it doesn't need to be really stabbed. You don't want it to be so compacted that you lose all of the squidge in it. So you want to keep it still squidgy, because I'll just measure that one. So yes, here we go. So 3 inches by 2 inches. Oh, actually, about 1.5, just over 1.5 inches. So that's your second piece. So yes, so as I was saying, you don't want to felt it too much, because then you'll end up with a very flat piece. And when you come to add them to your mouse, you're going to end up with a mouse that's very difficult to felt into a shape that you want. So what I'm doing here is I'm just taking sort of lots of bits of straggly ends that I've got hanging around from where I've been sort of pulling off bits of white wool when we were wrapping the armature earlier on. And instead of wasting them, I'm just compacting them all together, and I'm layering them on top of each other again, like we did a moment ago with the other 2 pieces. Now, this piece, which will be your third piece, is going to be a different shape. It's going to be more of a triangular shape. So I'm just going to hold down the wool again in place with my index and forefinger splayed, and I'm going to anchor it into position so it doesn't go anywhere. And then once I've done that, I'm going to create a straight side with my needles. And the multi-tool's great because it has got a lot of flexibility with it. And it just speeds the process up. And there you go, I've created my point there. So what we're going to do is just fold over the ends again. Again, this is creating more of a bulk as well. And then folding over the sides. And it doesn't have to be a perfect triangle. So don't worry about getting any kind of your kind of compasses or protractors out like when we were back at school. Just make a rough triangular shape that you know is probably going to go over the kind of the rough diameter of the armature that we've already created. I'll just pull over the other side and felt that one down as well. There we go. And just be careful again of fingers. And then I'm just going to do the end. And it doesn't have to be a perfect point. It just needs to just be narrower than the bottom part of what we've created. And what this is going to be is this is going to go up to the neck of our mouse, because we want to create some chest area and neck area to give him that more realistic look. And whilst, you know, I appreciate that this mouse absolutely doesn't look like a mouse you'd find running around in a wood somewhere, he's got more of a kind of a Muppety look to him. And, you know, the Muppets are real. So our mouse is going to look real too, just like the Muppets. Anyone tells me that Kermit the Frog isn't alive and well, wow, they are going to get challenged on that one. So we've made our 3 pieces. So the triangular piece was our piece number 3. So just remember that's piece number 3. And now we're going to be creating the bottom for our mouse. And we're going to use quite a lot of wool this time because we want it to be quite big. So it was about 9.5 inches by 4 inches in width. And it's about 3 inches in depth when it's not sort of compacted down. So I'm just going to pull the sides. I'm going to hold this down against the mat, and I'm just going to take the sides of this piece of wool and I'm going to pull them away, and I'm going to place them in the middle of the wool. So we're creating more of a bulk. And you'll be surprised how much this felts down, and you'll think, oh my goodness, this is going to create an absolutely huge Kim Kardashian bum. But you'll find once you've felted it with your twisted needles, it does compact down quite significantly, and you'll probably want to add some more wool. So what I'm doing is the same as I have done before. I'm just going to use my multi-tool to felt it. And actually this time we're just going to give the other side a bit of a felt as well. Just because there is so much wool in the sandwich, we want to make sure that it all sticks together. And if you've got any stray ends like I have here, just don't be afraid to just pull them away and place them on top. And what you may find in a moment, you're going to turn that over and felt that down. See, these pieces are all loose still. You don't want them to escape. What you may find is that the piece is too big in a moment. And I'm just going to show you how you can deal with that. But essentially, when you're making anything in felting, wool is incredibly forgiving. And if you have a piece that's too big and you haven't kind of tucked all the ends in like I have with the previous pieces, you can just kind of pull them away. So here we go. So it's too wide, this piece. So I'm just going to very gently tease the wool away, and then I'm just going to place it back in the middle of my wool again and felt it down. So we're kind of still adding to the bulk of our bottom, but it's just a little bit, it's not quite as wide as we had originally made it, because otherwise you'll end up with lots of straggly pieces going in areas like the head and things that you don't necessarily want them to. So once that's felted down, that will be your piece number 4. And as you can see, it's pretty thick in comparison. And this time we're going to leave the ends. We're not going to felt the ends into a a rectangular shape. So we're going to make the pieces for the head now. And we're going to be using exactly the same principles that we did a moment ago, only this time we're making a long piece. Which is relatively thick. And what I'm doing, as we did earlier on when we were wrapping the armature, I'm just teasing it a bit to make it a bit longer. That's about 10 inches by about just over 2.5 inches in width. And you just want this to be relatively long because we're going to wrap it a few times around the head area. So again, I'm just holding it down, and it's going to be a long piece. So we're going to just felt it in the middle, and then I'm going to, a bit like dough, I'm going to pick it up and move it and felt it a bit more. And wool can be a little bit like when you're rolling pastry out. Sometimes you want to keep moving it so that it doesn't stick too much to your brush mat or your sort of chosen felting mat. So it's good to move it around and lift it when you're doing things that are kind of 2D to stop that from happening, or when you're kind of felting things down in close proximity to the mat, so you don't end up, as I sort of spoke earlier about fibres kind of getting caught in your mat and then sort of pulling out of your sculpture, and it makes it a bit ugly and unsightly. So what I'm doing this time, so that's about just over 1.5 inches in width. I'm just folding over the sides this time to create a long strip of wool. And then I'm just going to fold over the ends as well, so it's nice and tidy. And I'm purely doing this just to make my life easier, so that when I attach this in a moment to the mouse's head, I've got something to felt against that's a bit more than the kind of the wisps of the ends of the wool, if that makes sense. Because the head isn't a huge surface area to press against. You'll see what I mean in a moment. So it's about just under 6.5 inches in length, that piece. But if yours is slightly longer or ever so slightly shorter, I wouldn't go any shorter than 6 inches. But if yours is kind of 8 inches, that's not a problem. But just remember that the longer the piece, the bigger your head will be. So the very last thing we're going to make is the kind of like the top of the mouse head. So I've taken another piece of wool, which is about 5.5 inches in length, and about 3 inches in width. And we're going to create a circular shape this time. So holding down with my index and forefinger splayed again, anchor it down, and then we're going to use our multi-tool and move it in a circular motion as we stab down to create a circle that's going to be the circumference of our mouse's head. And again, we're purely doing this so that we're making something to felt against later when we're adding in other features and things. So it's kind of like an anchor point, if you like. So I've created a circle and I'm just going to measure that. So that's 2 by 2 inches, well, maybe a little bit less on the width. So I'm just going to take that out a bit more. And again, it doesn't have to be exact. As long as it's kind of there or thereabouts in that ballpark, that's absolutely fine. But you don't want it to be too small because you'll struggle to kind of felt it on. You want it to be a larger circumference than the wrap once it's been wrapped around the mouse's head. So just give that a stab, and it doesn't matter. I'm just going to stab it on the other side a bit, just to kind of secure those ends down. And that's, 2 inches, 2-inch diameter. And that's your piece number 5. So we've got all of the pieces that we've now created for our mouse. And, piece number 6. And what we're going to do next is we're going to move on to attaching them to your mouse's body.